Good evening. I'm so glad to be with you and so glad that you have joined us here on Facebook. My name is Dr. Galen Goben, and I am the Grief Support Director for Forest Lawn. I'm a certified thanatologist. I've been involved with dying, death, and bereavement, which is what the word thanatology means. It's a big, long word for that, for the last 25 years in a variety of different ways. I've been so lucky to be able to support people and walk with people in their journey of grief. And I want to share with you tonight some of what I've learned, both from people like you that have gone through this experience, an experience of deep difficulty, but an experience that they've been able to go through. They've taught me a lot. I've also learned some things in books and going to seminars and things. And so we'll share a variety of things here tonight. But I want you to learn first that this is a safe place to be. I'm glad that you are here now and that this is a place where you can relax and be comfortable, because others that are watching are bereaved as well, and they share a similar experience. Nobody knows your experience like you do. Nobody understands, and I know a lot of people say that. It's kind of what we're taught to say, what we're socialized to say, but nobody really does understand each of, as individuals, what we're going through, because every loss is so dramatic and so different. So we do know that there's a lot of similarities in things and that we can learn a lot from one another. And so I invite you this evening to use the chat box there. Type in your name. Tell us who you're remembering tonight. Tell us who they are. Is this person your mom? Is this person your son or daughter? Is this person your husband, or maybe it's a grandparent? Or maybe this person is just a really, really close friend. Whoever they might be, you have a deep affection for them, and that affection is what brings you here tonight. It's what is the base of this experience of grief. And so we will learn a little bit about one another and with one another as we see those names brought up, almost like a necrology list of people who have died and that we are remembering, because tonight we do. As we gather in this virtual space here tonight, we bring them with us. They are sharing this time with us. So use the chat box, put their name there, tell us your name. I'd love to know where it is that you're joining us from. This is part of the beauty of the virtual world that we live in, because we can find out and connect with people from so many different places and learn about them and to share our grief with them and to share theirs. So put all that in the chat box. We'll learn together. We'll see what goes on, what we happen to have and know. And from time to time, I'll be checking my phone just to make sure that we've got some information there. And if you've got a question, it will be brought to my attention. So again, thank you all for being here. First thing I want to do, and this is a great coping skill. It's part of what we're going to learn tonight. We're going to learn a little bit about grief. We're going to learn about what it means to be grieving, as we have been for these past 13 months in the experience of this pandemic. And we're going to learn some things that hopefully will help us to manage this experience of grief. And that's about all that we really can do is manage it. We don't take charge over it. It can overwhelm us at times. It can grab us, feels like, grab us by the chest or something and seem to really get a hold of us. But there are some things that we can do to manage it. And so we'll share some of those. And this one that we're going to begin here tonight with is a fantastic way to do that. And so much of what grief does for us is a stress reaction. We find ourselves getting really tense. We find ourselves feeling really tight in our chest, compacted in our chest. That's just part of the physical things that grief does for us. Makes it hard to breathe and stuff. And so when we get that way, a great thing to do is to recognize that and acknowledge that, and to do some breath work. So, wherever you happen to be, sitting or standing, just kind of get yourself comfortable. And I want you to take a slow breath in through your nose. Kind of make that a little bit long there. Most of us, when we're pretty stressed, it's really up here. It's really up in our chest and really tight for us and stuff. So I want you to kind of focus on the area of your diaphragm just below your rib cage. Let your stomach kind of pooch out in front of you first. Let yourself do that, and so that you experience that the feel of what it does, because that will fill your lungs up better from the bottom up. And what that does is it slows us down. Somebody told me one time that grief is like walking along at just 2 miles an hour, and our lives are so busy and so full of things and stuff, and so full of craziness normally, that when grief comes along, it really requires us to slow down. And so we've got this kind of challenge going on back and forth between the need to slow down and what we're used to running at and feeling normal about. And so breath work can really help us do that. So take another deep breath, slowly let it out. And I invite you tonight, as we go along with this, to check in with yourself every once in a while. Check in with yourself and see where you're breathing, see where your breath is at. If it's up here and everything, it's just reach down inside and let it come down into your stomach and down into your diaphragm. Pamela, I'm glad that you have joined us and that you have brought your two brothers, Bo and Dean, here with us tonight. It's good to have you all with us. Good cleansing breath is always a great place to start. So grieving, why is it so hard? Grieving is just really, really difficult because it affects us so many different ways. It's just challenging, but probably the bottom line of what the challenge is that grief does for us is that when somebody dies, they take a piece of us with them. And it's like we lose our identity, a sense of who we are. I had a woman one time who said to me that when her sibling died, that she didn't know if she was a sister anymore. Was she a sister? Was she a sibling? Was she now an only child? What does that feel? And that really challenges who we are and our self-understanding and what the world feels like, because we know how to act and function in a regular basis, in a regular way, when we know who we are. And we spend a lifetime figuring that out. And then that person dies. And when they go, again, they take part of us with them. And so it's really challenging to figure out who we are. And that just has so many ways that it plays out. It's almost like a spider web that you get walked into. And then for such a long time, you're feeling so many different, webs, pieces of the web that you're pulling off as you get reminded of that grief, as you get reminded of that loss, as you get triggered again. And that's another really challenging thing, because triggers, especially early on in a grief, are everywhere. Triggers can come from seeing a picture. Triggers can come from hearing a song on the radio that reminds us of that person. Triggers can come from just maybe the time of day that we don't even really consciously recognize what's happening with us and what's going on. We end up, I knew someone who would always call their parent at about 3 o'clock in the afternoon just to check in. Whatever they were doing, wherever they were, they stopped, picked up the phone and would call in and see how they were doing. just for a little quick chat. And they noticed that every day, right around 3 o'clock, especially early on, they just would feel this tremendous sense of sadness come over. And again, a sense of loneliness. And that feeling of being lost. All three are really standard major parts of the emotions that we get when we're grieving. And that would just come over. And so triggers can come in so many different places. And one of the best things, again, that we can do to manage when those triggers come along is to simply acknowledge them. Let them come. They come to us. They come really from way deep down inside of us. They're not conscious most of the time. They're not conscious. That's part of why they feel so crazy, because they hit us with such force sometimes. And it's like out of the blue, boy, where did that come? And you find yourself crying and again, crying, normal physical experience of grief and all. And it just like popped up out of nowhere. And that's really challenging, especially if it happens in public. You're driving and you got to pull over. It just makes us feel really weird. So one of the things that we really want to do, again, a great way to manage this is to acknowledge it. When we feel it come up within us, do the best that we can to recognize what it is and to name it. Boy, I'm really feeling, angry right now. Or I'm feeling the sense of being lost. Or I just really, really miss them. Whatever that might be, whatever that experience is, and I'll just acknowledge it, offer it, say it, bring it to mind, because there's something that happens. It connects up our head and our heart, which is what grief is working with. It's trying to bring these two back together that have been kind of torn apart and ripped apart. It brings them back together when we say it in our head, when we say it out loud. It gets our head involved, and it reaches down and connects with our heart and acknowledges what the heart is feeling and experiencing. And that just pulls things a little bit closer together. Doesn't happen overnight. It isn't something that we can do once and forget it, because boy, these things they just come along very regularly for us. And so we want to just be aware of them. We want to acknowledge them and let them come when they come. Address them, kind of wrestle with them sometimes a little bit. Because it really does, this grief experience is a life-changing one. One of the things that it does is really cause us to address again and to look at our values, what we're spending our time with, what's important to us. That can be part of what's so hard about going back to work, or if you have a child in your house that now has to go back to schoolwork. They've been off for a few days and been given that respite there. The child goes back to school and everything, and they go back to their schoolwork, and well, what difference does it make? I don't want to spend my time on this because my mom just died, my dad just died, my grandma, grandpa, whoever it may be, my best friend, the sibling, whoever it may be. It can be really, really hard to focus and to kind of be able to do that. And so we want to allow ourselves the awareness of that. Again, it helps really, really, really well. Malad, I see that you said, yeah, sometimes it is hard to control ourselves in public. And it is really, really difficult. We feel weird. Those around us might feel strange, but I'll tell you a story too that someone shared with me. They had come across somebody who was crying in a store, and obviously it wasn't a total breakdown or something, but they were really agitated and very upset, and so this person said to them, I can tell that you're really really feeling sad right now and stuff. Do you want to share something about it? And that person shared that somebody they loved had just died. What happened in that moment, in that space, was while it was in the store, this person told me that really everybody else around just kind of almost disappeared. It was like it was them and the grieving person, and it became, if you will, a sacred spot, a sacred place for them, where they were able to share for just a little bit. People go on by, but the person who was crying thanked the other person when they were finished because they had actually been heard. And so we never know what kind of gift might come along. We never know who might be there. Somebody, if we're making them feel odd, well, that's all right. This is a really powerful experience. It's a powerful human experience. And maybe they have been through something like that too. And who knows, they might be able to step up and support us in a moment like that we just wouldn't have been ready for otherwise, or wouldn't have been able to acknowledge and wouldn't have received the kind of support that we have there. Christine, I see you've written in and you've lost your father 30 years ago, and it always feels like yesterday. And that's true too. Thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate that, because when we love somebody, they are never far from us. They're never far from us. Now we want to come to a place in our grief where we can, as Rachel Naomi Remen says, that we want to be able to grieve with love and not pain. But there's oftentimes pain that's still associated with that, because there's some things that we still want to share with them. Grieving is not something that we do. It's not finished in a box and then we're done with it. Because as we grow older, as we move through life, there's always things that we want to share with that person. There's always moments that we want to share. We want to tell them. And when that happens, when we have one of those moments, maybe it's a story, maybe it is the experience of the birth of a child or a grandchild that's come along, maybe it's a triumph that we've had someplace, some moment where we've been able to exceed what we expected from ourselves, and we know how happy they would have been to share that with us. That what's going on within us at that moment is not a grief experience that's 30 years ago. It's a grief experience right now. And we miss them truly. We always want them there, because love is never completely finished with a person. The truth is that we can pause at that moment, and because of the amazing thing that love does for us and that grief does for us, we can tie ourselves back together again with that person and find a way to tell them. Write them a letter. There's a great coping skill that we have, especially when we're really missing someone. We can sit down and take a piece of paper and write them a letter. And there's something that just happens with that really gets it out of us. It feels like we are translating that information and that experience to them. We can tell them that and write that out and say, here I am telling you. And that can feel really, really good. Or maybe we can just share with them, in our thoughts and in our heads, bring the image to our mind for when they are with us, and have them before us. Because truly, in an experience of love and as grief, we go through that and move our way through that and move forward with that. As we move forward with our grief, we take those people with us and we carry them with us through the rest of our lives. So what's it been like then to grieve for this past year? Because it's been really, really challenging. This year has been a year of grief unlike anything that we have ever experienced in any of us. Well, most of us. There are some people that went through the pandemic in 1918, 1919, but they are pretty few and far between. For most of us, this has just been an absolutely unbelievable year. And the things that we need as human beings to make our way through grief is to have people around us. And we've not been able to do that. That's part of sort of the collateral damage, if you will, that this pandemic and COVID-19 has wrought across the board with us as we have been grieving. And that is the loss of support, social support, our friends, our family, organizations that we may be a part of, whether they're a church or a temple or a bowling league or a book club and everything, someplace where we've been able to gather with people and all, and that we would expect when we are grieving, that we would get people to come to us, that we would have people that when we were in their midst would be able to support us, that would offer us a sense of compassion and encouragement and would listen to our stories, especially as we tell them over and over and over again, which is again something that we do normally in grief, particularly early on, that they would just listen, that we would have that person that we could call up and say, boy, I just need to get together for a while and talk. You got some time? And then we would gather together. And there's something, again, that we have grown used to over the millennia that we as human beings have been grieving. We've grown used to having that warm body with us. And COVID has kept us from doing that. And everything is like we are doing right now. People are two-dimensional. And we may be able to hear their voice and see them, and there's something really meaningful about that, and we have learned to get support that way, but it still just kind of leaves us a little raw, a little short. Many of us also weren't able to have funerals, and that can be really, really difficult. The rituals that we are used to having, the normal things that we are used to having, whether it's a funeral or a memorial service, where again, we gather together, we tell life stories, we make meaning about this person's life and find out what their life has meant to other people as well. That's been taken from us. And so I want to encourage you, if you are listening to me right now and watching this right now, and you've had to put off a service because you wanted to be able to gather together, that it's getting close and we need to do that. It is good to go ahead and do those things as best that we can. Somebody said to me the other day, and I thought this was absolutely brilliant. When we're born, we don't just celebrate a birthday one time and then done with it. That we will gather each year and celebrate and honor that person. And we all know that now that our person has died, whoever it is, we know that date. We know that time of year. We know that experience when it's there. And internally, it comes to us as well. And it's a date now that we will remember. And we need to honor that date. We need to remember that date and do something that will honor that experience. That will help us grieve. That is a great way of acknowledging and addressing the particular loss that we've had, and to give us a way to do that, a way to physically and mentally do something, which is what rituals do. And so if you're coming up on the first anniversary of your loved one's death, I would encourage you to do that and to have, a service again of some type. Go out to the graveside, or if you have, your person's cremated remains at home, do something special around that for that special day. It's really, really meaningful and can be helpful to acknowledge and again to work through some of this, to connect the head and the heart. One of the other things that has been really difficult for us this past year with COVID-19 is the fact that we've lost our distractions. Grieving is hard work, and we will spend a lot of time with it, and it will be like everything, and then we need to step away from it. We have to go back to work. We have to go back to school. We want to go back to work, and we want to go back to school. We need to find those normal rhythms again, because they create distractions for us. We focus at work, we focus while we're at home, we focus when we're volunteering someplace, whatever we may be doing. And Because of COVID-19, we've lost all those distractions. We haven't been able to go to the movies. We haven't been able to go to concerts. We haven't been able to, until recently, to go together again and be at a restaurant and do things just being together, laughing, which is some really good work for us, or anything like that. The distractions have been gone. And that has just kind of added another layer on top of why it's been so difficult and why everything is so deep for us right now. So acknowledge what that is. Another thing that's important about these losses this year is something that we call disenfranchised grief. And that's a loss that isn't accepted, that isn't acknowledged, that people don't recognize. And so we have this grief of this person that has died, somebody we love that has been in our lives and is means an awful lot to us. And all the other kinds of losses then that we have had to experience have layered things on top of that. Those disenfranchised griefs, like, the loss of the routine that we've had. Or maybe it is the experiences that we have wanted to be a part of, that we've not been able to be there. And others, just kind of moving on with their life and things. These things have been really just layer upon layer upon layer upon layer for us. And so we take a normal, difficult experience that we've had and we layer something else on top of it. And then when we have somebody, again, Milad, like you mentioned, your favorite singer there has died. That brings all of that grief back in together again. You say you draw portraits of her as a method of grieving. Fantastic. Thank you for sharing that. You've got some artistic things in you. I'm a stick figure person and it wouldn't be very good for me, but there are a lot of people that can really let that come out, and it's like writing, but it allows those feelings to come out, and we can draw what we're missing and what we're losing. So that is a great way of working with your grief, and I offer that to anyone else who may have a feeling of something along those lines, because these are coping strategies. It's what we need to do when we are in the midst of our grief, is to find these coping strategies that work for us. And for many, many of us, we really know how to do this, and stuff just kind of comes naturally. Milad, I would say that idea of that just kind of came up within you. I'd love to see you respond to that maybe it just sort of came up inside your heart and your thoughts, like, and you pulled out some paper and a pen or a pencil or whatever artwork method that you use, and started just drawing away. It wasn't something that you sat down and you went, I think I need to do something about my grief about this. And so what can that be? That can be helpful for many of us, but most of this stuff just kind of naturally comes up out of our heart the same way that the grief itself does. So great coping skills. One of the best that you can do is to name the losses that you've experienced over this past year. We've got the one of our persons who's died, and we have those reminders everywhere, and we carry that with us. But if we can find ways to acknowledge the things that we have lost that have gone along with that, what might that be? Well, some other things may be along the lines of, if the person who died was your go-to person for a counselor, maybe they just had deep, deep wisdom. And whenever you had a problem, you would go and you would ask them, and you'd sit down with them, or you'd call them or whatever, and you say, let me talk this through, or tell them your problem. And then you'd say, what do you think? What do you think I ought to do? And now that person isn't there. That's a great loss. You've lost your counselor there. We call those secondary losses. And the secondary losses have to be acknowledged and grieved as well. It's a part of what makes any kind of grief so big and huge. So acknowledge that. Write it down. Write it down. That is That is a key thing that you are doing when you support yourself, is when you write that down, when you figure that out, when you name it, that really does help you, because again, it goes out, you see it, your head registers it as well as your heart does, and it just brings all that back in together again a little bit more. So really important things that you can offer there and that you can do. Something else that I would share with you are some physical strategies. We started out this grief seminar with a breath exercise. Anything that we can do to help us connect with our bodies is really, really important and really helpful, because most of the time our bodies are in this this experience. Again, that's something that that the pandemic has brought to us, that COVID-19 has brought to us this last year, is that we've just been sort of in this high state of tension for well over a year now. And if we can get our bodies settled down, since we're walking around like this, we don't think about it anymore, but we need to do things that will help our bodies to relax. So something that's we all know about, but is really helpful to do, is to get some exercise. Walk, go out and take a walk, run if you're a jogger. I've got a colleague that goes out and runs even when he doesn't feel like it, because it makes him feel better. He's talked to me about having the stress just kind of, he sweats it out in some ways. The nice thing about exercise too is that it tires you out and helps you to slow down a little bit. Again, we talked about grief being an experience of life at 2 miles an hour, slowing down. We need to do that. So that's a really good thing. Exercise, walking, running. If you go to the gym and like to do that, that's great. That moving that weight around is really important, but find some way to get out and move. When the summer comes back around, we can go swimming again if that's what you want to do, but find a way to do some exercise. Get your body moving there and moving the muscles. It will burn out energy. It will burn off some of the excess calories that we have put on in COVID-19. And one of the other things that it does for us, tires us out, helps us to sleep better. It's difficult to eat. It's difficult to sleep when we are grieving. That's, physical responses. And those are very normal things. We need to recognize that that's normal. So we do what we can to respond back to that. If we're having trouble sleeping, find ways that we can do that. Exercise is really good. Reading before we go to bed, turning off TV and electronic devices, those are all things that are out there and stuff to help our bodies begin to slow down. And eating well, again, this is where our head will be really important in this, because our head says, okay, we need to eat well. Let me figure out what I can do that will make me feel better, that will help me to not just eat, something from the fast food lane and the menus that are numbered and stuff. That we can get a lot of good food within us that our body will know about. So those are some really great strategies and simple things that will start at a very base rate. Pamela, I see you write in and you say you wonder about talking to someone about your loss and everything. If it's still feeling challenging and you don't feel like you're moving anywhere, that is a great question. Thank you. Because many of us are that way. Then, yeah, it's up to you. It's up to each individual person. If you're feeling like you're stuck, and we know what that feels like. We know what it feels like to be stuck, where we can't just kind of seem to get out of the rut or get past something. Then that's a good thing to do. Find somebody a professional who can help us unpack things, because literally what's happened is there's just so much that's gotten, kind of put in on top of this, and never know what that is because everybody's different. That we need somebody sometimes to just help us take things out, look at them with a kind of a trained eye. Ask some questions about them, why we are experiencing that or whatever, but somebody who will not give us answers, but will lead us through, that will help us to find our way through the really challenging space that we find ourselves in, which is what grief is. So yeah, if you're feeling stuck, that's a great thing to do, is to reach out. If you want to know where to find somebody, give me a call. You can call into Forest Lawn 800-204-3131, or connect with me through our website, www.forestlawn.com, and connect with me. And that's one of the things that I do and provide as grief support director here. Is we'll talk about it for a little bit. We'll figure out what you think would be helpful, and we'll find somebody that that maybe will be helpful for you. I'll offer you 2 or 3 different people, and then you take it from there. And finding a good person that you can work with is really, really key in helps us to unpack this. Something's just got in the way. A normal experience of grief is an experience that we really just move through and naturally do that. But sometimes something happens, something's caught us. And it's good to go back and check in on that and to look through that. So coping skills, again, validate your loss and name it, especially when you're experiencing it. When it comes to mind, and you're having one of those moments, whether it's crying or one of the emotions or one of that just sense of feeling really just lost or complete exhaustion with it. Acknowledge it. Really important, really helpful. Acknowledge that loss, because that brings it to mind, again, connects your head with your heart and brings those things back together again. Work with your breathing. Something very physical, something you can do anytime during the day when you're feeling not, kind of tight. Write it out, find somebody to talk to. There are counselors out there as well as bereavement groups. And again, something I can help you find, which I'm glad to do. And then the other thing is the web is a great place to go. You can look around. I want to invite you to keep track of Facebook, because on April 28th of this month, we're starting a new Facebook page called Journeys Through Grief. And you'll find us here. And I'm going to be doing videos, and we'll be having things that you can think about, and questions and ways that you can interact with your grief, and just different ways to help you travel your journey of grief. Because each and every one of you that has been here today has your own journey of grief. They're similar, but they're not the same. And there's a lot of different ways through that. And so I invite you to join us there and connect with us on that, as well as at forestlawn.com and our grief support web pages there. So I really thank you all for being here tonight. I really appreciate it. Continue to check in with us. Continue to, you can always go back and watch this again if there was something else and on. If you've got any questions or anything, certainly seek me out. We'll be back to this in June again. And that will certainly put out some information about that and give those dates as they come up. So again, we thank you very much for joining us tonight. It's been really great to have you here and really important to be together. Have a good evening.